So good morning. Today I've tabled with the Speaker my first volume of my annual energy conservation report for 2010, aptly named Managing a Complex Energy System. My statutory obligation with respect to energy conservation is threefold. I must report on energy conservation and efficiency initiatives, progress on achieving targets, and barriers in the policy system. Most of my findings relating to progress on targets will be tabled in Volume 2 of this report sometime in the fall when the data becomes available. So today's report focuses on some of the policy issues of significance in energy conservation. And most of those issues deal with one type of energy conservation because in this province, although we have a long-term energy plan, we continue to focus almost all our attention on electricity to the neglect of other fuels. So electricity policy has become a controversial and complicated political battlefield on which the fog of war greatly obstructs our view of what is really going on. But through it all, one thing is absolutely clear. The most inexpensive and most available form of energy is that which we stop wasting or unnecessarily consuming. Energy conservation is the only cheap and abundant source of energy still available to our society. And that's why it deserves our attention and why it deserves our investment of resources. So what are some of the significant developments since last year's report? Well, we now have a long-term energy plan, and the government has put that out for public consultation, and we might even know how the public's input was considered if the Ministry of Energy would post a decision notice on the Environmental Registry, as is required by law. I am pleased to note that the long-term energy plan includes one of my recommendations from last year, in that Ontario now has targets for a reduction in electricity consumption, and that's the amount we use in terawatt hours, in addition to the targets in peak demand, in megawatts. We have a new pricing policy for electricity, which includes some tax credits, and a 10% rebate off the total charges on our bills called the Ontario Clean Energy Benefit. Regrettably, this benefit is of no benefit to the cause of conservation. It is a perverse incentive which undermines conservation because it rewards and encourages increased consumption. One study estimated that the increase in consumption from the subsidy will wipe out one-third of the savings expected from the utility conservation programs offered between 2011 and 2014. There are some positive developments in pricing. Regulation introduced a form of critical peak pricing for large electrical users, which is fairer and should significantly lower demand in those few critical peak hours of the year when demand is extremely high and the grid is under stress. And legislation was passed to clarify the rules around sweet metering. Sweet metering is the installation of individual meters in rented units and condominiums, so more consumers in apartments will be able to see the return on their conservation initiatives. The report also looks at the conservation and demand management programs that are supposed to be implemented by the Ontario Power Authority and the local distribution companies between January of this year and the end of 2014. There seem to be problems getting those things going. We're still not fully launched 6 months past the start date, and I'm concerned that these efforts will prematurely sputter to a halt because it's not clear that funding will continue into the 2015 and beyond. There is a brief but important discussion in my report about the smart grid. It is important because smart grid technology is where we and the entire developed world must go if we're to have a stable, resilient, and affordable electricity delivery system in the future. Smart meters are just the first, but the enabling step in the rollout of a smart grid. It disturbs me that there appears to be no effort by the government to communicate to the public the nature and benefits of such a profound technological initiative. If we were to flounder in this necessary reconstruction of our grid because of misunderstanding by the public, it would have grave consequences to our economic future in the North American marketplace. And finally, my report discusses various barriers to small distributed energy systems. One example of a barrier, perhaps innocently constructed, relates to capturing solar energy from our rooftops. We do this two ways. We can place photovoltaic solar panels up there and create electricity, or we can install solar thermal panels and collect energy to heat water in the building itself. Solar PV is funded generously under the Microfit program, and it helps meeting our renewable energy targets. Solar thermal provides heat that is directly used and thus highly efficient, and it also reduces the creation of greenhouse gases. But all the programs that supported the installation of solar thermal have been terminated. Clearly, we have misbalanced the incentive system to our disadvantage. Are there any questions?